It is cold as shit outside, yo. Last night I felt it on my way back home. I was like, God damn, this temperature. And the psychiatrist on my team where I work at a hospital, he was asking me if I had any weekend plans. And I'm like, I may go to this HBCU game where I got invited to, I got free tickets to for today, actually. I think it starts at 1 o'clock, but I don't think I'm going to go. Granted, the game is going to be inside, but I'm like, When I felt that temperature last night coming home, I'm like, sheesh, and it's even colder today. So I decided to stay inside and be warm and do this video. I received an email from a gentleman, a white man, earlier this week on Tuesday, January 31st. And I read it and I'm like, here we go again. Yeah, this is not the first email that I received like this from a man, because I received a few from white men and even a black submissive man who is sharing his experience. We're going to get into the email, but it's almost like this sorrowful story, this pity party that they want to, I guess, have or whatever. They want people to feel bad for them, and I'm like, I don't feel bad. I can't find it in my heart to feel bad, right? I've made several videos taking my time, giving my heartfelt advice from my own personal experience. So it's like, I think that you guys actually like this. And this is part of the dynamic of a submissive beta man, masochistic submissive beta man. Like, you like pain. You like emotional pain. Some people love to be humiliated. Some people love to be discarded and thrown away. Hello, Mustang. Where are you watching from? Some people love that, right? So I'm like, I don't feel bad. This is what you want. Because if, in fact, it's not what you want, you don't have to deal with this, right? This is your choosing. Now, granted, I like in all my videos, I like to be very transparent. I like to kind of speak from personal experience. I will be doing that here in this video. But I'm just like, are you writing the email to genuinely get advice? Because we're going to get into this, right? It's a very meaty email that this person sent. Or are you just looking for sympathy? Y'all let me know. What is the intent behind this person sending this email? So he says, I'm a 48-year-old white man who has been very masculine and dominant for most of my life. Right? Makes sense. A lot of men are socialized to be dominant, to be a real man, so to speak. Last year, I was in a relationship with a black woman who started introducing me to BDSM. Now, granted, they know that I identify myself as a submissive, right, in the context of BDSM. And it's not just a sexual submissive, right? Because I think a lot of times people are drawn to BDSM, drawn to these alternative sexual lifestyles because of the sex in of themselves. And for me, it's more about the dynamic. It's more about the submission. It's more about the need, the desire to feel protected. And for a man to take control over that responsibility, that duty, and setting limits and telling me what to do and establishing mutual trust and then rules that we both agree upon, right? That's why I'm attracted to this lifestyle. Unfortunately, though, the men who identify themselves as doms, right? Like I said, oftentimes people are drawn to this lifestyle because of the sex. So for them, it's all about sexual domination. That's what drives them to this, right? And they present themselves as a dom, a real dom. But can a person say they are a real dom if they're only dominant in the bedroom? This is where we need to take a pause and really look deeply within ourselves and really take some time to think about what exactly is it that you are yearning for, that you need instinctively, intuitively, innately, right? Like this is something that is driving you, right? And you're watching this. A lot of beta men watch my videos. Ask yourself, like, what is it about me? Maybe innately, or what is it about my experiences in life that have shaped me into this person that craves the attention, the affection, the nurturing of a dominant woman, specifically a Black woman. I mean, I guess Black woman, what better woman to do the role, to do the job than a Black woman, right? We have that natural, innate dominance within ourselves. There are white women, though, who carry that characteristic, but I think for Black women, it just comes so organic. That's just who we are, I think. The Black woman and the Black man. Right? So it's just like, why get a knockoff when you can get the real thing coming from a Black woman? Of course, that's just my bias. But yeah, I always, especially as a person who is very attuned to myself, right? Who has much insight into who I am, what drives my behavior, and especially being a psychologist, like I always have to take it back to the psychological underpinnings of our behavior, our motivations, our drives, our sexual affinities. Like that is where we need to focus. Then it all begins to make sense. Otherwise, you just keep running in circles. You keep sending me these mundane, redundant emails. Maybe you just want to share your story. Maybe you just want to share your experiences. Maybe you're not really looking for advice or looking to gain some insight to improve your quality of relationships with women. Maybe that's not what you're looking for. Because if you were, all right, and you're watching this, like, why not take the time to ask yourself, like, what is driving this need for me to submit? What is it? And do I truly value myself? Before I get into the remainder of this email, because we just kind of touched the tip of the iceberg, I have to revisit this discussion, this kind of awakening that I experienced myself when I was living back in Los Angeles. As part of my doctoral studies, we are required to seek out psychotherapy from a licensed psychologist en route to becoming a psychologist ourselves, right? So I hired a psychoanalyst to fulfill this requirement. It was a woman. And I could never forget because she challenged me in so many ways. And of course, me being the transparent person I am, I didn't withhold that I identify myself as a submissive, as a baby girl, right? And I kind of crave to be dominated. And of course, there's so many misconceptions when it comes to, what this lifestyle, what these behaviors actually entail, right? Like people already have their preconceived notions on their understanding of what it means to be a submissive, right? Or what it means to be a masochist or a dominant, or a sadist, right? And oftentimes those preconceived notions are shaped by the messages that are promoted, on the media, in the media. Right. And they rely on what they see or hear, porn sites, or on blog sites. is not really accurately reflective of the true nature and the true dynamic of this experience, right? Like, it's really not. It's like people may read an article on BDSM and then they automatically assume that that kind of encapsulates everyone's experience who identifies themselves with this lifestyle, BDSM. And that could not be any further from the truth. But she gave me, like, she challenged me in so many ways and asking me the right questions. And she said, because I was explaining to her that, of course, I like to be dominated, and not just obviously in the bedroom, but 24/7. Like, that's just what I crave. That's just who I am. I like for a man to tell me what to do. And she said to me, she made an interpretation, right? The psychoanalytic interpretation. She said, so you are agreeing to submit to a man in exchange for a man taking care of you. And for her to put it that way, I'm like, hold on. The pieces of information I gave her was that obviously I like to submit and I like to be taken care of. But for her to align it in that way, that I am giving my submission, this gift, something so sacred, something immeasurable, in exchange for a man telling me what to do and taking care of me. She posed it in such a way, she framed it in such a way that, wait a minute, you are selling yourself short. A man taking care of you and telling you what to do does not amount to the amount of sacrifice of what you're giving in terms of your submission to another person. It made me think, like, wait a minute. It didn't change my inclination to be a submissive, right? That's just going to be that's just who I am, right? It didn't change my desire, my affinity towards BDSM. And the fact that I like bondage, I like being tied up, and I like being beaten, right? Of course, in the context of a secure, loving, trusting, safe relationship, right? But it didn't remove those desires, right? That's always going to be there. And I let her know that very clearly, that I am not going to change. And I don't think that was necessarily her intention to change, my affinity towards the actual lifestyle of BDSM. But what it did do is make me look within myself a little bit deeper and see the parts of myself that maybe I'm not quite appreciating, that I don't fully value. And I'm like, wow. I know we always like to tout, like, oh, I love myself. I value myself, right? I appreciate myself. But then obviously there are kind of little inner parts of ourselves hidden deep within the crevices, right? That we may have not really had time or had the attention to drawn towards these things, these parts of ourselves that have been overlooked. And it's just like, I could actually value myself even more, right? Because it's on a continuum. It's on a spectrum. So granted, when I stepped foot in her office the very first time, of course I love myself, right? But it just made me gain a deeper love for myself and a greater appreciation in valuing this gift of submission. It's like, wow, it is a gift. And I knew that it was a gift, right? But that value of that gift shot up drastically in value. It just did. It just shot all the way up. So how would that impact my behavior thereafter? Well, like I said, I still was craving, that firm guidance, that loving, firm guidance of a man, and the strong hand of a man, right? And just imagining, how it feels to be disciplined by a man. Like, that's something I think about very often. Not that I haven't experienced it, but because I want to experience it more and more and more and more, right? But at the same time, balancing that with safety, with protecting myself, right? So it affected my behavior in the sense that I'm very cautious. Though I've had slip ups. I'll share one and then we'll continue with this email. But when I moved back to New York in 2020, this was at the brink of the pandemic, April 1st, 2020. And, the world was in shambles and everyone was so uncertain about our futures and what was going to happen, with the entire world, right? Everything was being shut down. And with everything being shut down and all these uncertainties, of course, I craved affection. Like, I craved just connection, with a man. And I sought that through dating apps. And I was on a dating app and I met this man who I deemed to fit the criteria, of what I look for in a partner. He was physically attractive. He was in shape, had a nice physique, chocolatey. I was a little bit taller than him. I think I'm 5'8", so I think he was like 5'6" maybe, but that wasn't really significant. He was talking my language. I'm a Pan-African, right? I have much political awareness in what's happening in our society and the social political context of what's happening in America and, across the globe. And so we were able to have discussions relating to issues that impact the Black community. We bonded in that way. And I remember when we first met and we connected, right? And at the time, I was renting different Airbnbs. I was kind of like Airbnb hopping. This is before I secured my place where I live now here in Upper East Side, Manhattan. But, I was kind of living and testing out the waters in different neighborhoods across New York. And at that time, I found a house that I rented in Jersey City, which is like 10 minutes outside of Lower Manhattan. And I remember feeling safe enough to invite him over. And this is a gem that I'm dropping here. I'm being very vulnerable right now and just transparent. And I invited him over, and I remember that just the mystique, the weirdness of the times and what was happening, right, in the environment. Like, that was when they was putting up the 5G towers, and I was staying on a street. It was all homes, residential neighborhood, that they had blocked off each side, right? And I remember when he came to visit, he was like, wow, it must be someone very important on the street, because they had like a blacked out SUV on one end of the street where no one could pass through, and then a blacked out SUV on the other end of the street. No one could pass through, right? The street that I was staying on at the time. Or it's very difficult to access that street. And I just remember the weirdness of it, like, the air, the atmosphere, not being able to go outside, right? And so you can imagine, like, with so much chaos and uncertainty happening in, my immediate surroundings and just in society in general, like, this is happening, internationally, not just in America, right? Like, one would be seeking comfort and connection and just closeness and security from another individual. And I thought I found that in him, right? And of course, he knew that I identified myself as a submissive. And here is where it gets tricky, right? This is me being a submissive woman speaking to my fellow submissives, whether men or women, that we most certainly have to be careful with kind of tossing that word around, because there are so many vultures There are many, many vultures out there. People who abuse the privilege of calling themselves a dom and having access to a submissive. They abuse it. And there's a part of us, like there's a part within us that we resonate with that abuse. I've spoken to my experience on what shaped me as a submissive growing up developmentally. I'll talk about it a little bit briefly here, right? I grew up in a 2-parent household with my mom and my dad. My dad, I would say he was more authoritative, leaning more so on the permissive side. My mom was definitely authoritarian. She was a disciplinarian, overboard with it. And the way she would discipline me and my sister, I think was just extremely harsh. It was abuse, but she would threaten that, oh, if you call the white man is going to come pick you up. Essentially talking about child protective services, calling authorities, and they're going to do you worse than I do. So you better lay down here and take this ass whooping. Kids nowadays don't know anything about ass whoopings, right? They just don't know. But we got beat. And I call them the old-fashioned slave beat because that's what I felt like growing up. Where she would have us lie down on our beds. Before we lie down, take off all of our clothes, strip down. This is like pre-pubescent. This is before I hadn't even reached puberty. I didn't have breasts. It was just a little kid, like elementary school age, right? 8 years old, 7 years old, 6 years old. Take off all our clothes. We get to leave on our underwear, our panties, right? But lie down, bare back, bare legs, chest exposed. And she would beat us with extension cords, with cable cords. And I was going to actually bring in a prop. I don't know if I have a loose cable cord here, but just sometimes people, they are a bit confused as to what that actually looks like. Oh, I have a loose cable. Here's one. But sometimes people are a bit confused as to what that actually looks like. But this thing right here, she would use one of these. Do you see the thickness of this? You guys know what this is. Beat us with this. And I mean, wear our ass out with this thing here. Wear our ass. We would be left with welts on our body, yo. It was traumatizing. It was traumatic. And those beatings would go on it would feel like half an hour until she got tired. When she got tired, and that's when she would stop. And I felt like it was coming more from a place of hatred. You know, it was like she said that she was doing it because she felt it was the right thing to do, right, to correct our behavior. But she got beat that way. And she always would talk about, this is when we got older, she would always talk about how her mother chastised her extremely, right? And, you know, you can feel like the bitterness coming off the end of that extension cord or the cable cord or the leather belt that she would use, you know. And it got to the point where I hated my mother so much. Like, I would pray. Hold on, I'm getting these notifications. Do not send data. But it would get to the point where I remember praying for my mom's death. And I was like, I was young. Like I said, like 6, 7, 8. And I got beat all the way up until age 16. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I just want to kind of lay this foundation because oftentimes people don't revisit their childhood. They don't ask those questions. They just think like, okay, well, this is just who I am as an adult. This is what I like. It's fun. It's fun. It's exciting. It feels good. Right? But I mean, that's a bit immature. Right? You're not just a sexual being. You're a whole being, right? So to look at your whole self and to break down what makes you who you are, even as it influences your sexuality. I think it takes a mature person to do that, an elite person to do that, right? And I've done that many times over, looking at myself, right? I'm very much aware of the different things that have shaped me, right? My experiences, my childhood experiences that have shaped me into becoming the person that I am. But yeah, I remember like back, yeah, I would pray that she would just get into a car accident, but on her way home, just like, I just would pray that she did not make it. That's how bad it was. Because I knew that her explanation and the way that she would discipline me and my sister was not justified. I knew that it was abuse, right? And yeah, I just grew so bitter and angry towards my mother. And then fast forward to being an adult, and not even not even fast forwarding, because even as a child, like I remember having these fantasies of wanting to be tied up and beaten, right? Because we have our mind has a way, an adaptive way of coping with very harsh and traumatizing experiences, right? And so that's just how the mind, it works. And so it adapts so that it makes accommodations for these bad traumatic experiences so that it fits in, right, to our reality in a way that makes it seem like it's okay, makes it seem like it's normal. And we justify it, right? And if we can take control over our own trauma, we do, and we reshape that in a way that now we are in control, so that we fantasize about creating this reality where we can lay it out, where we can lay out this enactment of a scene that we have full control over as the author of our lives, right? So I used to do that, right? Just as a child, fantasizing, what it would be like. And especially, as I made it through the stages of puberty, 12, 13, 14, imagine like, maybe getting beat isn't so bad. And what it would be like to intertwine my beatings with bondage. I mean, I already feel like a prisoner, growing up in a house where I have very little say so, very little control, very little autonomy. So why not just give it up, right? Why not be a willing participant in that and give up that control and imagine myself being with a male and allowing this person, me giving them permission, because of course I didn't give my mom fucking permission to beat my ass. I had no choice, right? But being in a position to give a person permission to do that to you, allow them to. That's like how the mind comes to resolve this interpersonal conflict, right? This internal struggle of being victimized and not having the power to say no, to refuse this type of treatment, right? So this is what I do. I challenge men, because that's who mostly watch my videos, especially relating to topics such as this, to look within yourself. We can continue to have the discussions, and right, and I'm going to continue reading this email. We can talk about sex and BDSM all day, right? But I think that it's worth looking within so that you can enhance your quality of life, so that these experiences can be much better. You can still do these experiences, but obviously there's an aspect to the experience that you are disappointed with, that you are dissatisfied with. It does not have to go that way. That's all I'm saying, right? So up your value a little bit. Let's continue reading. So he says, I'm a 48-year-old white man who has been very masculine and dominant for most of my life. Last year, I was in a relationship with a black woman who started introducing me to BDSM. I have always been turned on by a woman who takes charge in the bedroom. So when she started reading articles to me about the DS relationship, I was very intrigued. So he's saying he's always been this masculine and dominant person, but obviously masculinity and femininity and dominance and submission, those are on a continuum. No one is 100% dominant. No one is 100% submissive, right? No one is 100% masculine. No one is 100% feminine, right? It's on a continuum, and we all, both men and women, we have characteristics of both traits, right? Both ends of the spectrum. And obviously there is a part of him that is submissive. And for a woman to be dominant, like in his situation, this black woman is dominant. But what kind of dominant? Is she truly dominant? She's saying that because she's feeding onto that. And the thing about these natural occurrences in nature, right? And how we attract people into our lives. I think it's important, like, you have to know yourself. If you don't know yourself, then you're not going to know why you're attracting this kind of person, right? Well, this person obviously came into your life to teach you a lesson, and that lesson hopefully is well learned. And if you don't learn that lesson, right, you don't take the time to reflect, then you're just going to repeat that same mistake. It's going to happen again, right? All right, let's continue. Yeah, you're going to be someone else's victim. So when she started reading articles to me about the DS relationship, I was very intrigued. She told me that she was used to being in total control of her life, and she wanted that same control over her man. When I say, like, it's important to be in tune and attuned to yourself, that attunement to yourself makes you attuned to other people, right? Because essentially, we are each other's reflection. If you fully know yourself, like you take the time and you spent time alone and you took time to reflect and really study yourself, study your past and how it connects to your present, right? And being a scholar of yourself, it makes you a scholar of other people because you understand human behavior in that sense. There are no surprises. There should be no surprises. Like, oh man, I can't believe this happened to me. No, there's no surprises. This was destined to happen to you, right? And you were a willing participant in that. Everything was aligned for it to happen the way it happened. You just did not see it coming. She's telling you here that she wants total control over her life, and she wanted that same control over her man. Here he goes. I wasn't sure what this meant, but I was willing to go along with it. Right there. You wasn't sure what that meant. You are a 48-year-old man, right? I get it. Maybe you're at a time in your life where you just want to let go, right? You just want to have fun. You want to probably feel a little bit youthful, be spontaneous, be open to experience. Because they say that obviously there's a correlation between age and openness to experience. And the more that we age, the less open we are to new experiences. So sometimes people like to keep themselves youthful and vibrant by reversing that, right, intentionally, and allowing themselves to be open, be less guarded, say yes more as opposed to no to different invitations from people that may seek interaction with them. She told me that she was used to being in total control of her life, and she wanted that same control over her man. I wasn't sure what this meant, but I was willing to go along with it. The thing about these types of relationships, yo, this can be very dangerous. Like, I don't think people really understand the gravity of power exchange. That's not something to be played and toyed around with. I mean, unless you don't give a fuck about your life and you're willing to take those risks. With some people, they live life on the edge. They're okay with that. And you're one of those people, then okay, you're okay with the consequences of living life on the edge and being a risk taker, right? But at some point, you reach a point in your life where you take calculated risks, right? And you make decisions based on the cost benefit and how it's going to impact your life. You're not just out there willy-nilly wilding the fuck out at 48 years old. I mean, unless you're just out there wilding the fuck out at 48 years old. Most people around that age, you're not doing that. Not to say you're closed down completely to having fun and to engaging in these types of alternative sexual relationships, but you're mindful. You're still, a calculated person. Just because you want to explore a little bit, your sexuality and have fun doesn't mean that you just throw out all of your common sense. See, I think that's the thing when we are embarking on these new experiences, which I've mentioned in previous videos, the mistake that people make and the misconception that people have as it relates to this lifestyle is that they just assume like, okay, BDSM is in its own box. No, there's much overlap. At the core of relationships and humanity, like, it's humanity. You have to have that basic understanding of what human beings need, what human beings like, right? That's the basis of it. Just because a person identifies themselves as wanting to be someone's pet, right? Or wanting to be a dom or a submissive or a baby girl doesn't mean that they are not human. They are human first before they identify themselves as whatever label that they want to attach themselves to within the context of BDSM or the LGBTQ community, right? They still are a human being. That doesn't go out the window. So you still ask questions to gain an understanding. You don't just turn a blind eye to things. If you do, then obviously you probably wouldn't have gotten that experience. So take it as a lesson learned. So he says the last 8 months of our relationship, he didn't say how long the entire relationship lasted. He just says the last 8 months. Now this could be a completely made up story, completely fictional, which I've gathered that some of these emails that people send posing as their testimonial experience is just really this fantasy that they have, right? And they just want to engage in this discussion. And I've said that I'm open to that. I don't mind that. Obviously, I'm a storyteller myself, right? The last 8 months of our relationship, I spent being her slave and being feminized. I really enjoyed her making me wear women's clothing and especially underwear, and I really like her pegging me. This is where it gets kind of questionable, right? And it sounds much more like a fantasy than an actual experience. The last 8 months of the relationship. Why the last 8 months of the relationship? Why not the first 6 months? Why the last 8 months of the relationship this started to happen? I mean, how did y'all establish a relationship to begin with anyway? Was it on the terms of BDSM? Like, that to me doesn't make sense. Obviously, parts of this story that are missing. There are gaps that are left out. If this is a real story, which I'm questioning because it just doesn't seem accurate. It doesn't seem like an honest story. The last 8 months of our relationship. I spent being her slave and becoming feminized. I really enjoyed her making me wear women's clothing and especially underwear, and I really liked her pegging me. Unfortunately, she chose to leave me just as I was learning to be a good bitch for her. Like, these are the questions that I have, right? And this could be an ongoing conversation because if in fact this is a true story, and she's saying that she wanted total control over you, like you said, you didn't know what that meant earlier, but you were willing to go along with it because she has complete control over her life, her own life, that she wants complete control over another person's life, right? But you wasn't sure exactly what that meant. Let's go along with this if this is actually true. What I'm thinking, what my initial reaction to this story is, I think y'all wanted two different things. Like, you had this fantasy in mind that you wanted to become emasculated or feminized, as you call it, and wearing women's clothing. You know, you said that, you know, in your earlier life, you know, you identified as more as a dominant masculine man. So you kind of inherently developed this desire, like this leaning, this attraction towards becoming more feminized, you know, and being dominated, which I still think that that's linked to something. You know, I think it's linked to something a little bit deeper than you just kind of evolutionary kind of wanting to become a woman, right? And be dominated by a female dominatrix. Like, I think it's something else to that. And it's like, you guys don't go there with me. Obviously, I'm challenging you to go there with me. I've done this before, but you guys aren't willing. I actually didn't take that back. There was actually one. That's why I love that series and actually went on for so long. There was this, did he identify himself? No, I think he did identify himself as a dom. I think he said he was an attorney. He was in the UK. I made a whole series on cuckolding in the UK on YouTube. You guys, I have this whole series. Go check it out. But yeah, like, he identified himselse as a dom. However, he wanted to kind of explore the whole cuckolding thing. And the thing I like about our interaction, right, when he first, just like this guy, sent me an email and I responded to it, tapping into these psychological underpinnings, and he went with it. I think he had the level of insight and intellect, obviously, to dig a little bit deeper, which made for a very fruitful conversation, obviously. And I think that's the reason why that series was like 4 videos long. Go check that out. But yes, and he wanted it to continue. And at some point, you know, I had to let him know, like, we have to kind of cut this off because we can go on forever, right? Like, this is obviously what I do for a living. And I love it when people, you know, have that self-awareness. Like, when people are willing to dig deep into themselves, you know, that obviously is very attractive. I like that. I love that, right? So, you know, he was going along with that. Obviously, I would make a video. He would reply via email, send a very thorough response, you know, via email, thoughtful, he's taken time to kind of take in things that I've said, and of course he would add on, and then I would create another video, and then he would reply via email, and then I would create another video. And it was like, I think a four video long series. He actually wanted me to do video consultations with him. And I'm just like, I can't. I think that we've reached our limit with talking about this. And it turned out that he said, you know what? At the end of it all, he had second thoughts about becoming a cook. I was like, wait a minute. I don't think I want to risk something that I value, my wife, and trying to usher her into this lifestyle. At the end of it all, from our interactions and from, me obviously challenging his experiences, his fantasies, right? And the source of his fantasies, and exploring that with him publicly, obviously, it made him think twice, which I think is a good thing. Because I received a lot of emails from men who have talked about they wish they had saw the red flags and the mistakes and the pain and the negative consequences they've endured from not pausing, not taking this time that I always kind of encourage you guys, I challenge you guys to take this time to reflect and ask yourself to really get to know who you are, know what's driving this. And when you know what's driving it, then you can make more attuned decisions on what you're going to do next, right? As opposed to just being driven by these urges. You know what's driving it, but you have these urges and then you end up in it makes for a very bad outcome, right? And then you're on here emailing me like that freaking black male cuckold did. I made a video on that, outing what went wrong in his situation, just being very frank and honest. And he took offense, but I was just speaking the unadulterated truth. I nailed that shit. Like, when I'm right, I'm right. I can be wrong and I can be corrected, which there were times where the attorney from the UK had indicated that, wait a minute, I actually agree with this, but I have a different perspective on this thing that you said, right? But this story, we're going to get to the ending. It reminds me of the same story that Black Male Coco sent me. And I guess he was seeking remorse, and I felt nothing. If anything, it's laughing stock. This shit is funny to me. Because what is it going to take? Right? It's one thing to be victimized. And it's another thing to use it as a crutch. Use that victim mentality as a crutch. And I think when people do that, they victimize other people, right? Like, you have to be careful of those kind of people, because they will go around pointing the finger like, oh, you did this to me. No, you did that to you. We enter this relationship a mutual agreement. Just because you don't like the outcome of it doesn't mean you are a victim. You agreed to this, and now you're reneging on your agreement. Oh, this isn't what you want. Because you realize this is not what you want. Truly, this is not what you want. So it goes back. Why are you driven? What is driving you to have the urge to do this? Getting your ass caught up in something that you know really nothing about. With someone you don't really know anything about. Like you just said, I don't know what that meant. She's saying that she's telling you this. So it's not like you're going in blindly necessarily. She's telling you that she likes complete control. You didn't know what that meant, what that looked like. That was your opportunity to explore. What the fuck does this mean? Complete control. But you are so desperate. This is the issue here. The desperation is what irks my freaking nerve of a lot of beta, white, submissive men. Just so, like, yo, they be flooding my freaking inbox and they somehow think that I am a dominatrix, which I'm not. But they think that and think that I'm interested in them. And I'm like, part of me is like, I should do it just to teach your ass a lesson, okay? But no, you're not about to fuck up my goddamn shit, what I got going on, because of your desperation and ignorance. But it needs to happen to your ass. Somebody needs to do something to your ass, okay? So you can slow the fuck down, right? And then engage in this these are very sensitive behaviors. These are not something you just carelessly engage in. No, you have to treat it with care and caution. And you can only do that with a mutual consenting partner who respects you. They can still be dominant and want complete control, but the respect has to be there. That goes back to the core humanistic aspect of this. Right? Those principles of just being a respectful human being have to be understood first and foremost. Because everybody walking around carrying these labels of being a dom, no. Just because they're a dom, so they're the perfect match for you? No. I really enjoyed her making me wear women's clothing, and especially underwear. And I really liked her pegging me. That's what you like. My question is, did she like that? Because like I said, it seemed like y'all went in with two different intentions. I don't think y'all were a match. You liked that. Not one time did you say she liked it. Did you say that? No. You liked wearing women's clothing. You liked her pegging you. I don't know if she liked that. And so you go, unfortunately, and this is the funny part right here to me, okay? Unfortunately, she chose to leave me just as I was learning to be a good bitch for her. You want to be that bitch, and this is what it looks like for you to wear, women's clothing and to get fucked. I have a problem with that word, bitch. I just do. Like, what does that mean, bitch? Right? Does it mean being feminine? Wearing women's clothing? Getting fucked? That's what it means to be a bitch? It makes sense why she dumped your ass. And she treated you like yesterday's garbage. It makes perfect sense, right? Think about that, though. Think about what could be going on in her mind, right? Even though she identifies as a dom and she wants complete control, she's still a woman, right? So this here is where it may sting a little bit. And because people like yourself don't want to take the time to do the inner work, this is where I come in, right? I'll have to just lay it out plain and fucking clear, right? And you can take the meat and throw out the bones. Do what you want with it. But I have a major problem with that word, bitch. Right? And I also have a problem with men. Not that, okay, you want to be a woman or you want to cross-dress, right? But oftentimes these men who take to certain behaviors, right? Whether you identify yourself as a submissive man or you identify yourself as a trans woman or homosexual or whatever, oftentimes underneath those identities is a man who has harbored negative feelings towards women. It could be traced back to his mother. Oftentimes, a lot of shit that we experience as adults, how we manifest ourselves as adults, is traced back to childhood, right? What the relationship was like between you and your mother. But they harbor negative feelings, negative attitudes towards women. Then somehow they transition into a woman. The very thing that you hate so much, you become one. For this guy, he wants a woman to help him along the way with this transition of being feminized. The irony, right? I could be wrong. Correct me. But the truth lies within. And my thing is nothing more freeing than siding with the truth. People can live a lie all their life, all they want. All right? That's you. But how comfortable is that? How is that working for you in living your lie? Just live the truth. You see how transparent I have been. I'm honest. Some people would be ashamed to admit that they were physically abused, growing up. I have siblings that deny that, or a sibling, shall I say, that denies the abuse. But it's ever clear. It's ever clear the negative impact that the abuse has had on her. I'm not even going to go there, okay? Because that's her story to tell. But going back, to these men who often share this common characteristic of harboring negative attitudes and strong negative feelings towards women, somehow becoming a woman. They somehow become a woman, right? And ironically, this man, or not ironically, this man, wants to make his way, right? To make his way into that identity of a woman through a woman. And she's like, hell no. That's not what obviously she wanted. She didn't sign up for that. Clearly, this is your experience. Clearly, she didn't sign up for that. She wanted to dominate, yes. You said that's what she admitted to, wanting to be in control. But what does that look like for her? You admitted that you didn't know what that meant for her. It got to the point where, I feel like this is where people be doing stuff, right? Entering relationships on some sneaky shit. They're not being genuine. They're being dishonest about their intentions. And the truth always comes to the light, and then it goes up into shambles. Right? There's a combustion. There's friction. Because something wasn't laid out on the table. You're going to run into problems if you're not being transparent and honest from the gate. You knew this is what you wanted. So you're going to go, oh, the last 8 months. Oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. The last 8 months of our relationship. I kind of came out, and it obviously eventually these behaviors and this interaction that you have with this woman evolved to this point of, you know, you wearing women's clothing and you know, her pegging you, right? That's what you wanted. And granted, at that point, if y'all had established obviously rapport, right, and a degree of trust, you know, some kind of connection, you know, maybe you have got her to the point where you can convince her, even if that's not what she had agreed to initially, maybe that's wasn't really her cup of tea. Had she had experience? Did she have previous experience doing those things? Because we're saying all else equal, right? All else is equal. If you both wanted the same thing, that should be a perfect match made in heaven. What the hell went wrong? I don't think y'all wanted the same thing. There's no way y'all wanted the same thing. That would be a perfect match made. And this woman, being a dominant woman and being in control over her life and wanting to dominate and control someone else, right? And also getting off, right? This is one of her fetishes, that she loves feminizing men, making them wear women's clothing, making them her little bitch, as you call it. Pegging men. If those are things that are her fetishes that she loves. Meanwhile, these are things that you are drawn to, that you love. That should be a perfect match made in heaven. I don't think that that's what she went into that relationship for. That was a little bit too much, y'all. Come on now. And people need to be honest. Like, listen, lay it out there. That's what you like. That's what you like. This is a no judgment zone here. This is about honesty, transparency, being genuine, clear, having clear communication with your partner, having love and understanding for yourself, valuing self so you don't end up in these situations unless that's what you want to end up in. You have to have respect for yourself before you can have respect for another person. It's good that she threw your ass away because that's not what she wanted. At the end of the day, whatever became of you, which is you were fully exposed, you let her know, this is who I am. I am this bitch wearing this dress or whatever, however you looked, whatever choice clothing that you had on, wearing your heels. This is who, hello, surprise, this is who I am. She threw your ass away. That's not her cup of tea. You cannot be mad at her because that's not her cup of tea. That's just like a person who is a trans woman or who is a trans man, but they don't let that person know. And granted, they may feel that, oh, this is my business. Because I am a real man or I'm a real woman. So why do I have to tell people the sex that was assigned to me at birth? Because it matters. Because there are men who want a woman who was born with female genitals. That's what they want. They don't want a woman that transformed into a woman who was born with male genitals. That's not what they want. It's about what a person is seeking, what they have intended, what they thought that they were getting that they didn't really get. That's not, no, you can't do surprises like that. That's like you going to buy a condo. You're going to buy property and it's advertised as something, but then you realize, oh, well, it's not quite that. It appears to be that, but it's really not that. I thought it was exposed brick, real exposed brick, but turns out it was just laminate, right? It was just wallpaper. Like, wait a minute. You know, I saw this whole debacle online about, was it Aretha Franklin's song, Natural Woman? that the trans community is somehow offended by a song. And my funny enough, my the psychiatrist where I work, he was like, "Wait a minute, how they gonna get mad about something that came before them?" Like he always comes with jokes. I thought that was hilarious, but it's just like, are you kidding me? What has the world evolved to, right? The nerve of some people. You need to check yourself. If that is who you are, there's no judgment. You can be that. I have much more respect for people who stand tall in who they are unapologetically. What is there to hide? Yes, one can make the argument, oh, well, these people are targeted and they are attacked and they, suffer violent attacks from people who are homophobic or transphobic. And granted, yes, that could be true, right? But there are still laws against that protect people against that. That's just like for Black people. We are targeted because of the color of our skin, of what we were born as. In fact, we didn't have a choice. We're targeted. Doesn't mean that, okay, we should not be unapologetically Black. No, I'm going to stand even taller in my Blackness because I am targeted, because they don't want me to be happy with who I am. Let's make that clear. Unfortunately, she chose to leave me just as I was learning to be a good bitch for her. Now I feel like I'm never going to be able to find a woman who would take control and make me her bitch. You've given up, sounds like, right? You had this terrible experience. You were really feeling her. You were riding that wave. Like finally your fantasy has come true. Sounds like this is your first encounter of a relationship that could have fulfilled your fantasy of being feminized and being made a woman's bitch, right? It didn't turn out the way you expected, so you've given up. You said that you're never going to be able to find a woman who would take control and make you her bitch. Perhaps you could. I think it's just about being forthcoming in that. And granted, we're talking about very niche behaviors. This is not common. This is not mainstream stuff. This is underground stuff. This is a very niche community we're talking about. So yes, I'm aware how difficult it could be to find a woman who shares in your interests, right? Who is your compatible partner and what you're looking for. That can be very difficult. And I don't really recommend FetLife. It may seem like, okay, that's a good community to start, right? Obviously, there are people who share in those fetishes, who identify with those interests on that social networking site called FetLife. But to my experience, it's like that's not a good place, especially like if you are a person who value who you are, and you have basic respect for yourself and dignity, like you esteem yourself to a certain regard. Like, I feel like the people there, and like I said, I'm not here to cast judgment, but it's obviously for me to make this observation. I think it does hold weight, and to each his own, but that's definitely not for me because it's hypersexual and people, nah. You get your needs met, they get their needs met, and they're on to the next, right? And it's like it's this big kind of cornucopia of just sex addicts and sex demons, of people just wanting to feel those sexual urges without taking the time to really know themselves, right? It's just like I have a major problem with people who kind of lead with that, and for them that makes up the totality of their existence. It's just sex. It's just like, okay, but we're human beings. And the thing that separates human beings from animals is that we can think, right? And we can make rational decisions. Yes, we can still enjoy our sexuality, but you're not just out there indiscriminately having random sex with people and engaging not only just in sex, but these very dangerous acts that can put you in harm's way. A lot of times people are on there to get their sexual needs met, and they're off. And then you know, may have a connection to this person, which it seems like, I mean, you talking about last 8 months, so y'all had been together at least for 8 months. You develop this attachment. She throw you away. It's a lot of that shit happening. The throwaway culture, the ghosting culture. That's what we're living in. It's a lot of that shit happening now. It can be very dangerous. You're letting a person into your innermost space, right? And you're very vulnerable. You're sharing, you know, your deepest fantasies and vulnerabilities with a person that really don't give two shits about your ass. They don't give a fuck. All they care about is them, and they're on, right? You have to be careful. Going back to the story that I shared earlier at the beginning of this video, where I invited this guy who I thought, I'm like, damn, he meets the criteria, right? We're vibing. We're connecting on that intellectual, psychological level related to things that interest me, right? Politics. And they come around where, yes, you know, I'm physically attracted to him and vice versa. You know, we have sex. And the fact that he knew that I identify myself as a submissive, right? He played upon that. And I was vulnerable because I'm like, okay, damn. You know, there's a part of me that resonates with a part of him that is more sadistic, right? And dominant. And here I am, you know, loving not only physical pain, sometimes I think emotional pain, right? And we're having sex and he's just like trying to validate, because he can see, like, before we actually really get into it, he can see my level of resistance or reservation, right, towards him. Like, should I, right? And so he's playing upon that by saying, oh, you know, this is like, you're a good submissive, right? This is a submissive thing to do. Opening yourself up, and god damn, you know, I ain't gonna front. Motherfucker laid it down. He showed up, right? The performance was excellent, okay? So I don't fully regret that experience, you know, in and of itself, but just looking back and reflecting, I can see how I felt after I realized it was just nothing more than him getting his sexual needs met, right? And he wasn't truly emotionally available. He played upon my interest of being a submissive. And I felt so empty afterwards. I'm just like, damn. It's just like, you know, you go buy something and you realize, like, damn, you got sold. Like somebody sold you some bullshit. But after it's too late at that point, you're like, well, damn, that's how I felt. Taken advantage of. That's not a good. In the moment, oh my gosh, it was ecstasy. He was saying everything I wanted to hear, and I felt, you know, very vulnerable in my submissive state, opening myself up to him, right, and allowing him to thrust himself very deeply in my inner loins, and I'm just like, ah. But then it's not worth it. Like, what is the price that you pay? You have to ask yourself this. Is not worth it, and are you going to continue? And look at the role that you play. I could easily carry on and be like, well, damn, woe is me, right? He victimized me. He took advantage of me, right? I could take that stance, but no. The only thing that is going to change so that it doesn't happen again is me. I don't have control over him. Of course, I shut his ass off, so he no longer has access to me. no longer taking his phone calls, right? But you have to draw that boundary with other people, and not only with other people, but within yourself. Even if it means you being abstinent. I'm not even going to front. It's very difficult to find someone who is genuine and who respects you as an individual. That's what it boils down to. Unless you are one of those people who are on Fat Life, for example, and you just like, you know what? I just want to get my sexual needs met, right? I'm not looking for a connection. But even if you're not really looking for a long-standing connection, we're still human. We're still human, right? So you got to be careful dealing with people, because other people, I mean, obviously if you come with your stuff linked back to adverse childhood experiences that obviously have driven you to have certain interests and cravings and fantasies, other people have too, and you can only imagine what's driving their fantasies and their fetishes, right? The dark side of what's driving their fantasies. And no figure that the freaking social networking site Fat Life, the background is just dark, right? It's a reflection of the actual truth that lies within these people who are drawn to this. It's not judging. It's just pointing out the obvious. We have to be honest. People are not willing to be honest about things. That's the problem. Now I feel like I'm never going to be able to find a woman who would take control and make me her bitch. And honestly, I really want to. You're desperate. Not only do you want to, you are freaking deathly, dangerously desperate to have this situation play out. How do I tell other women that I meet what I want, and when should I tell them? Bingo. See, that's why I be knowing what I be talking about, yo. I be knowing why. This question right there. The question right there at the end. So it seems like he has thought to himself and has done a little bit of self-reflection. Thinking like, I think I made a mistake. What can I do differently? Because he didn't do that, right? For him to say this, how do he ask the question? This is his very last statement. How do I tell other women that I meet what I want, and when should I tell them? Bing. I'm good. Listen, I have to pat my own self on the back. I know I'm good at what the fuck I do. This is before y'all see that I even made that interpretation. This is before I even got to this point of the email. When I initially got the email, I skimmed through it and I'm just like, okay, another motherfucker that had a bad experience, right? Not really taking the time to thread through the details of it. When I'm reading these emails, this is the first time I'm reading it thoroughly on live. So y'all saw that I already made that interpretation early on, that this man did not set out with clear intentions. He did not make that and those intentions clear from the jump. That was the mistake that he made. And he's talking about when should he do it? From the jump. Listen, either a person likes you or they don't. Why hide? That's the mistake that people make. And when you make that mistake, this is what your ass gets, okay? I hate to say it. It's not to... Listen, because people were saying, I know it has happened to trans women where they like, oh, well, you know, it came out later and told them, and then I got my ass whooped. And it's not to justify violence, but it's just like, come on, though. People... I'm about to end this video. Either a person likes you for who you are or they don't. Right? You know, it should be a no-brainer that you come forward and with the truth. From the jump, come forward with the truth and let a person know that, hey, this is what I want. Not later on down the road, because that in and of itself is mischief. You're being sneaky. You know this is what you want. You're leading a person on, right? Feeding their ego, feeding this idea of what they want. You're feeding into that. But you know deep down inside, there's more to the story that they may not be in agreement with. That's unfair. And for a person to think that's not unfair, that's very selfish. So whatever happens after that, you really get what you deserve. Because in fact, this is the way I look at it. Listen, if the law did not exist, the law obviously is there to help certain motherfuckers, right? Protect certain people, right? But if the law did not exist, how would you go about it? You'll be left to your own devices, and you would be left to take these calculated risks. You'll be more calculated because you know you will not have the law to protect your ass, to back your ass up in this, right? So you have to move through life as if the law, thinking about in the context if the law wasn't there, right? Would I be this careless and irresponsible in my behavior and interactions with my potential partners, knowing that they could retaliate? Now, in this situation, you know, the extent of, I guess, what happened wasn't that bad. The outcome wasn't that bad. She just discarded your ass, right? Point blank, period. Because that's not what she wanted. It could have went way far left than that. She left you right where you were. And my advice, it should already be clear at this point, is for you to be honest. First, before you go seeking out another person, do that deep soul searching and understanding what's driving you to do this. Just because I'm challenging you to do deep soul searching doesn't mean that the act in and of itself of cross-dressing or being pegged as a man is bad. That's not what I'm communicating here, right? No matter what your interests are, just still ask yourself, what's driving me to have this type of interest, this type of fantasy? Then you can move forward with that. If you are secure, and fully have a complete understanding of what's driving that urge, right? And you're okay with it. You've come to a resolution of that within yourself and can stand confident. See, the reason why you can't stand confident, you're reluctant, you're hesitant to put this out there from day one, is because it's something there that hasn't been quite resolved. Nobody don't want that. Nobody's not going to want to engage with you if there's something there. And I kind of touched on it earlier with your language, the use of the word bitch. Some people love being called bitch. Some people like calling other people bitch, right? But it's something there. I'm going to end it right here. You guys feel free to share your comments below. Share this video. If you are the author of this email and you're watching this, feel free to follow up with a video reply and we can make a part 2 to this series. By now, you guys should know that I am unapologetically honest, right? And of course, this is my opinion. This is my perspective, right? But I can back it up with substantial personal and professional experience in the work that I do. All right, guys. Catch you guys later.